The crack of the whip echoed through the dusty street of Knight's Ferry, California, drowning out Winifred Keating's anguished cries as the leather tore through her calico dress and into the tender flesh beneath. A crowd had gathered in the late afternoon sun of 1873, their faces a mixture of morbid curiosity and discomfort as Judge Morton Preston oversaw the public punishment. "Let this be a lesson to all servants and hired help," Preston's voice boomed across the town square. "Property has value. Disrespect it and face the consequences." Winifred's crime had been simple yet, in the eyes of her employer, unforgivable. She had dropped and broken a fine china plate while serving dinner to the wealthy cattle baron Samuel Blackwell and his business associates. The plate, imported from Europe, was apparently worth more than 3 months of her wages. But to Blackwell, the issue wasn't the cost. It was the principle and his own pride in front of his guests. Blood trickled down Winifred's back as the whip struck for the 5th time. She bit her lip until it bled, refusing to give Blackwell the satisfaction of hearing her beg for mercy. At 22, she had already endured more hardship than most faced in a lifetime. Orphaned at 16 when influenza took her parents, she had made her way to California from Missouri, working wherever she could find employment. Knight's Ferry had seemed promising with its growing population and opportunities, but now she wondered if she would ever find a place to truly call home. Yancey Young stood at the edge of the crowd, his fists clenched so tightly that his knuckles had turned white beneath his worn leather gloves. The 30-year-old cowboy had only been passing through town, intending to stay just long enough to restock supplies before heading back to his small ranch 15 miles outside of Knight's Ferry. What he was witnessing made his blood boil. "That's enough." Yancey's voice cut through the crowd's murmurs. He pushed his way forward, his tall frame and broad shoulders making it easy to part the onlookers. "This ain't justice. This is cruelty, plain and simple." Judge Preston's thin lips curled into a sneer. "This is none of your concern, cowboy. The law permits correction of servants who damage property. The law also says a man can't treat another human being like they're worth less than a dinner plate," Yancey countered, his hand instinctively moving to rest on his holstered Colt. Samuel Blackwell stepped forward, his expensive suit and polished boots marking him clearly as one of the wealthiest men in the county. "Young man, I suggest you move along. Miss Keating is in my employ, and her punishment is both legal and deserved." Yancey's green eyes narrowed as he sized up Blackwell. "How much was that plate worth exactly?" $50, Blackwell replied with smug satisfaction. "Imported from France. Irreplaceable." Without hesitation, Yancey reached into his pocket and pulled out a leather pouch. He counted out $50 in gold coins and tossed them at Blackwell's feet. "There's your money. Now cut her down." The crowd went silent. Blackwell's face flushed with anger, but before he could respond, Yancey turned to address the onlookers. "Is this what Knight's Ferry stands for? Whipping a woman over a plate? What's next, hanging a child for spilling milk?" Several townspeople shifted uncomfortably, avoiding his gaze. A few nodded in agreement. Sheriff Thomas Miller, who had been watching the proceedings with evident discomfort, finally stepped forward. "That's enough payment for the damaged property, Blackwell. The punishment's over." Blackwell glared at the sheriff but knew he was outnumbered in public opinion. "Fine. She's fired anyway. Let her find work elsewhere with that reputation." As the ropes binding Winifred to the whipping post were cut, she collapsed. Yancey moved quickly to catch her before she hit the ground. He removed his duster and gently draped it over her shoulders, covering the torn dress and bloodied back. "Miss, can you stand?" he asked quietly. Winifred's deep brown eyes met his, filled with a mixture of pain and fierce dignity. Yes, she managed, though her voice was barely above a whisper. Thank you, sir, but I don't need charity. It's not charity, Yancey replied. It's basic human decency, something that seems in short supply around here. He helped her to her feet, steadying her when she swayed slightly. Name's Yancey Young. I've got a room at the boarding house. You can rest there while I fetch the doctor. Winifred Keating, she responded, wincing as the movement sent fresh pain through her lashed back. But everyone calls me Winnie. As Yancey guided her away from the dispersing crowd, she asked, Why would you help a stranger, Mr. Young? $50 is a considerable sum. Yancey's expression darkened. Because I've seen what happens when good people stand by and do nothing, and no amount of money is worth a person's dignity. What Yancey didn't mention was that he'd witnessed his own mother suffer at the hands of his father years ago. He had been too young and powerless to help her then. He'd vowed never to be that powerless again. The town doctor, an elderly man named James Harper, came quickly when summoned to the boarding house. Mrs. Peterson, the proprietress, had already helped Winnie into a spare room and provided clean water and cloths. These wounds need proper cleaning and dressing, Dr. Harper said after examining Winnie's back. She'll need rest and care for at least a week to avoid infection. I'll pay for it, Yancey said without hesitation. No, Winnie protested weakly from where she lay on her stomach on the bed. I can't accept that. I don't know how, but I'll find work and repay you. We can discuss that after you're healed, Yancey replied firmly. After the doctor left, having applied salve and clean bandages, Yancey sat in a chair by the window while Mrs. Peterson helped Winnie into a borrowed nightgown. You're new in town, aren't you, Mr. Young? The older woman asked as she tucked a blanket around Winnie. Just passing through, he confirmed. Got a small spread about 15 miles east. Haven't been to town in almost 2 months. Mrs. Peterson nodded. Well, what you did today won't make you popular with Samuel Blackwell, but there are plenty in town who'll respect you for it. She patted Winnie's hand. You rest now, dear. I'll bring up some broth later. After she left, an awkward silence filled the room. Winnie finally broke it. You should go about your business, Mr. Young. I don't want to delay your return to your ranch. Yancey leaned forward in his chair. My business can wait another day or two. I want to make sure you're going to be all right. Why? The question was direct, her tone almost suspicious. Yancey considered his answer carefully. Because it was the right thing to do, and because I know what it's like to be alone in the world. Something in his voice made Winnie believe him. She nodded slightly, then closed her eyes, exhaustion finally overwhelming her. Yancey watched her for a moment, noting the curve of her cheek and the dark lashes against her pale skin. She was beautiful, despite the circumstances that had brought them together. But more than that, he'd seen the fire in her eyes, a determination to survive that he recognized all too well. The next morning, Yancey visited the general store to purchase supplies. As he entered, conversations halted and several patrons gave him appraising looks. The store owner, Harold Jenkins, greeted him with unexpected warmth. Mr. Young, is it? Heard about what you did yesterday. Brave stand you took. Wasn't brave, Yancey replied, uncomfortable with the attention. Just couldn't stand by and watch. Well, it made an impression. Blackwell's been throwing his weight around this town for too long. Jenkins leaned closer and lowered his voice. How's the Keating girl? Recovering. Doc says she needs rest. Jenkins nodded and began filling Yancey's order. While waiting, Yancey overheard 2 women discussing Winnie. Such a shame about that girl, always so polite and hardworking. Blackwell's been impossible ever since his wife died last year, takes everything as a personal slight. Well, he won't find another housekeeper easily, not after this. Yancey filed away this information, his mind already working on a plan. When he returned to the boarding house, he found Winnie sitting up in bed, her face drawn with pain but her eyes clear and alert. Mrs. Peterson had helped her wash and change into a simple cotton dress borrowed from her daughter. "Mr. Young," Winnie acknowledged him with a small nod. "I wanted to thank you again for your intervention yesterday. Please call me Yancey." He set a small package on the bedside table. "Brought you something." Winnie unwrapped the package to find a jar of honey and a small bottle of lavender oil. "The doctor mentioned these might help with healing," Yancey explained. "Thank you," she said softly, touched by the thoughtfulness. "But I still don't understand why you're doing all this." Yancey took a seat in the chair beside her bed. "I heard talk in town. You need work and I need help. My place isn't much, 300 acres, small cabin, about 60 head of cattle. Been managing alone, but it's getting to be too much." He paused, suddenly nervous. "I'm offering you a job, Miss Keating, as a housekeeper. Proper wages, your own room, and no one will ever raise a hand to you." Winnie's expression cycled through surprise, suspicion, and finally careful consideration. "That's very generous, but I don't know you, Mr. Young." "Fair enough," he acknowledged. "I'm proposing a trial period, 1 month. If you're uncomfortable at any point, I'll bring you back to town and pay your way to wherever you want to go." "And what exactly would my duties be?" she asked cautiously. "Cooking, cleaning, mending. Nothing beyond what's proper," he assured her. "The cabin's basic but solid. 2 bedrooms with a door that locks from the inside." Winnie was silent for a long moment. Her options in Knight's Ferry were now severely limited. No one would hire her for respectable work after Blackwell's public dismissal. His influence was too great. She could try another town, but with what money? The alternative was finding work at the saloon, something she had desperately avoided since arriving out west. "When would this arrangement begin?" "Once you're well enough to travel," Yancey replied. "Doc says that'll be at least a week." Winnie nodded slowly. "Very well, Mr. Young, I accept your offer on a trial basis." For the first time since she'd met him, Yancey smiled, a warm, genuine expression that reached his eyes and transformed his rugged features. "Good. That's good." The week passed slowly for Winnie. Dr. Harper visited daily to change her bandages and check for infection. The wounds were healing well, though he warned they would likely leave some scarring. During this time, Yancey made arrangements for their departure, purchasing a wagon with a canvas cover to make the journey more comfortable for her. On the morning of their departure, Winnie stood outside the boarding house, saying goodbye to Mrs. Peterson, who had been uncommonly kind during her recovery. "You take care, dear," the older woman said, pressing a small bundle into Winnie's hands. "Some dried apple tarts for the journey. And remember my offer if you ever need a safe place. My door is always open." "Thank you for everything," Winnie replied, genuinely touched by the woman's kindness. Yancey helped Winnie into the wagon, where he'd arranged blankets and pillows to cushion the ride. As they pulled away from Knight's Ferry, Winnie felt a mixture of apprehension and relief. She was heading into the unknown with a man she barely knew, yet somehow she felt safer than she had in months. The journey took nearly 5 hours, winding through rolling hills dotted with oak trees and across open stretches of grassland. Yancey kept the pace slow and steady, mindful of Winnie's healing back. They spoke little during the trip, but the silence wasn't uncomfortable. When they finally crested a hill and Yancey's property came into view, Winnie couldn't help but feel a small surge of hope. The cabin was exactly as he had described it, modest but well built, with a small front porch and smoke curling from the stone chimney. A barn stood nearby, along with a corral holding several horses. In the distance, cattle grazed on the green spring grass. "It's not much," Yancey said, misinterpreting her silence for disappointment, But it's peaceful. It's lovely, Winnie replied honestly. After the crowded boarding house and Blackwell's opulent but cold mansion, the simple homestead felt welcoming. As they approached, the cabin door opened and an older man emerged. He raised a hand in greeting. "That's Hector," Yancey explained. "He helps out sometimes with the cattle. Lives in a small place about 2 miles west. Must have seen us coming." Hector Rodriguez was in his 60s, his weathered face telling the story of a life spent outdoors. He greeted Yancey warmly in accented English, then tipped his hat respectfully to Winnie. "Señorita, welcome. I have prepared the house as Señor Young requested." "Thank you, Hector," Yancey replied. "Everything quiet while I was gone. No problems. The new calf is doing well." He turned to Winnie. "I must go now, but my wife sends her regards. She hopes to meet you soon." After Hector departed, Yancey helped Winnie down from the wagon and led her inside the cabin. The interior was simple but clean: a main room with a stone fireplace, a wooden table with chairs, and a small sitting area with 2 worn but comfortable-looking armchairs. A kitchen area occupied one corner, with a cast-iron stove and open shelving holding dishes and cooking supplies. "Your room is through here," Yancey said, leading her to a door on the right side of the main room. "Mine's on the opposite side." The bedroom was small but tidy, with a narrow bed covered in a patchwork quilt, a chest of drawers, and a small window that looked out toward the mountains in the distance. Someone, probably Hector's wife, had placed a small vase of wildflowers on the windowsill. "It's perfect," Winnie said, meaning it. "Thank you. I'll bring in your things. You should rest. We can talk more about arrangements in the morning." That night, lying in her new bed, Winnie listened to the unfamiliar sounds of the countryside: the distant lowing of cattle, the soft hooting of an owl, the gentle creak of the cabin settling. For the first time in years, she felt a tentative sense of security. Whether it would last remained to be seen, but for now, she was grateful. Morning came with golden sunlight filtering through the curtains. Winnie woke early, years of domestic service having ingrained the habit. She dressed carefully, mindful of her healing back, and ventured into the main room to find it empty. Through the window, she could see Yancey in the corral, working with a young horse. Determined to earn her keep from the start, Winnie set about making breakfast. The kitchen was well stocked with basics: flour, coffee, bacon, eggs. By the time Yancey came in, she had a meal prepared and waiting. He paused in the doorway, surprise evident on his face. "You didn't have to do this. You're still healing." "I feel better today," she replied, which was mostly true. "And I prefer to be useful." They ate together, the silence broken occasionally by Yancey explaining his daily routine and the workings of the ranch. After breakfast, he showed her around the property, pointing out the vegetable garden behind the house, the chicken coop, and the spring that provided their water. "I usually leave at dawn to check the herd," he explained. "Back by midday for dinner, then afternoon chores. Simple life, but it suits me." "How long have you been here?" Winnie asked. 5 years. Bought the place with money saved from driving cattle up from Texas. It was run down, then took a lot of work to make it livable." "You've done a fine job," she said sincerely. Yancey seemed pleased by the compliment. "Thanks. Never thought I'd settle down, but something about this land felt right." Over the next few days, they established a routine. Winnie took over the cooking and household chores, moving carefully as her back continued to heal. Yancey worked from sunrise to sunset, tending to his cattle, mending fences, and training horses. They ate their meals together, conversation gradually becoming easier as they grew more comfortable with each other. Winnie learned that Yancey had been born in Tennessee, the son of a horse trainer with a heavy hand and a taste for whiskey. He'd left home at 16, finding work with cattle drives and eventually saving enough to buy his own land. He never spoke directly about his childhood, but Winnie sensed the pain that lay beneath his brief mentions of his father. In turn, she shared her own story, her happy childhood in Missouri, the devastating loss of her parents, and her journey west in search of a new beginning. She spoke of her time working in various households, ending with her employment at Blackwell's estate. He wasn't always cruel, she admitted one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. After his wife died, something in him changed. He became bitter, finding fault with everything and everyone. "That's no excuse," Yancey said firmly. "Grief doesn't give a man the right to hurt others." Winnie nodded, absently tracing her finger along the arm of her chair. "No, it doesn't. I should have left sooner, but jobs for women are scarce and I needed the wages." "You don't have to worry about that now," Yancey assured her. "You've more than earned your keep here." It was true. In just 2 weeks, the cabin had been transformed. Winnie had a talent for creating comfort from simplicity: wildflowers in mason jars, curtains fashioned from spare fabric, shelves reorganized for efficiency. The meals she prepared were delicious, despite the limited ingredients available, and Yancey found himself looking forward to returning to the cabin each day. As for Winnie, she discovered that life on the ranch suited her. The work was hard but satisfying, and there was a peace to the rhythms of country living that soothed her spirit. More importantly, Yancey treated her with unfailing respect, never raising his voice or making demands. 3 weeks into their arrangement, Hector and his wife Maria invited them for Sunday dinner. The couple lived in a small adobe house nestled in a grove of oak trees. Maria, a warm, plump woman with quick hands and a quicker smile, embraced Winnie as if they were old friends. "So good to meet you at last. Hector says you have brought life back to that lonely cabin." Winnie blushed at the implication. "I'm just the housekeeper, Mrs. Rodriguez." Maria winked knowingly. "For now, perhaps. Come, help me with the tamales while the men talk." In the kitchen, Maria showed Winnie how to prepare traditional Mexican dishes, chatting all the while about her 6 children, all grown and scattered across California and beyond. Her eldest son, she proudly reported, was studying to be a doctor in San Francisco. "Yancey is a good man," Maria said as they worked. "Quiet, yes, but honorable. He helped us when others would not." "What do you mean?" Winnie asked. Maria's expression grew serious. 3 years ago there was trouble. Some men from town, they did not want Mexicans owning land. They came at night, threatened to burn our home." She made the sign of the cross. "Yancey heard about it. He rode over and stood with Hector, said anyone who wanted to harm us would have to go through him first." Winnie wasn't surprised. It matched what she had seen of Yancey's character, his instinct to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. "He is alone too long," Maria continued, her tone turning matchmaking. "A man needs a family." "Maria," Winnie protested, her cheeks warming, "it's not like that between us." The older woman simply smiled. "Time will tell, my Hija. Time will tell." Dinner was a joyful affair, with Maria encouraging everyone to eat second and third helpings. Afterward, Hector brought out a guitar and played folk songs while Maria sang. Yancey, more relaxed than Winnie had ever seen him, even joined in for a song he'd learned on cattle drives. On the ride back to the ranch, stars blanketing the night sky above them, Winnie broke the comfortable silence. "Thank you for taking me along today. It was wonderful to meet the Rodriguezes." "They're good people," Yancey replied. "Been neighbors since I settled here. Maria's always trying to fatten me up." Winnie laughed softly. "She tried to send half her kitchen home with us." "That's Maria for you, always taking care of everyone." He glanced at her. "You seem to enjoy yourself." "I did, very much." After a pause, she added, "They told me what you did for them, standing against those men from town." Yancey shifted uncomfortably in the saddle. Wasn't much, just showed up and made it clear they weren't alone. It was a brave thing to do. No braver than what you did, standing up to Blackwell when you knew what it would cost you. Winnie hadn't thought of it that way before. She had always seen her confrontation with Blackwell, when she'd finally objected to his unfair treatment of the kitchen staff, as a moment of foolishness that had led to her public humiliation. But perhaps there had been courage in it too. The month passed quickly, and the day that marked the end of their trial period arrived. Neither of them mentioned it until after supper, when Yancey finally brought up the subject as they sat by the fire. "Your month is up," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "You've kept your end of the bargain admirably." Winnie's stomach tightened with anxiety. "And you've kept yours. The offer still stands. If you want to leave, I'll take you wherever you want to go. Or," he paused, his eyes fixed on the flames rather than her face, "you could stay. Same arrangement but permanent. Better wages now that I know your worth." Relief flooded through her. "I'd like to stay if you'll have me." Yancey finally looked at her, a rare smile softening his features. "I was hoping you'd say that." As spring turned to summer, their lives settled into a comfortable rhythm. Winnie's back healed completely, though fine scars remained a permanent reminder of that fateful day in Knight's Ferry. She took on more responsibilities around the ranch, learning to ride and even helping with the cattle when extra hands were needed. Yancey expanded the vegetable garden at her suggestion, and they spent evenings on the porch shelling peas or husking corn, talking about everything and nothing. He taught her to shoot, insisting that every woman living in the country should know how to handle a firearm. She proved to be a natural, her steady hands and keen eye making her a better shot than either of them expected. They made occasional trips into Knight's Ferry for supplies, Winnie holding her head high despite the stares and whispers that followed them. Blackwell ignored them when their paths crossed, though his glare spoke volumes. Most of the townspeople were cordial enough, especially after it became clear that Winnie was respectable, employed, and not living in sin, as some had initially assumed. Mrs. Peterson always welcomed them warmly at the boarding house for lunch, eager for news and company. On one such visit in late August, she pulled Winnie aside while Yancey settled their bill. "You look well, dear," the older woman said approvingly. "Country life agrees with you." "It does," Winnie admitted. "I never thought I'd enjoy it so much." Mrs. Peterson's knowing gaze shifted to Yancey. "And what of your employer? Does he agree with you too?" Winnie felt her cheeks grow warm. "Mrs. Peterson, it's not what? Not proper to notice when two people clearly care for each other." "Nonsense." She patted Winnie's hand. "I've been watching the way he looks at you when you're not looking, and the way you look at him too. Was it that obvious?" Winnie had been trying so hard to maintain professional boundaries, to ignore the flutter in her chest when Yancey smiled, or the warmth that spread through her when their hands accidentally touched. It would be inappropriate to develop feelings for her employer and dangerous to assume he might return them. "He's been very kind to me," Winnie said carefully. "Kind, yes, but there's more than kindness in that man's eyes when he looks at you." Mrs. Peterson sighed. "Life is short, dear. Too short to deny the heart what it wants out of fear or propriety." The words stayed with Winnie on the journey home, echoing in her mind as she watched Yancey's strong profile against the setting sun. Could Mrs. Peterson be right? And if she was, what should Winnie do about it? The opportunity to find out came sooner than she expected. The following week, Yancey received a letter from a cattle buyer in Sacramento, offering a good price for 20 head. The deal would require Yancey to be away for at least 5 days. "I don't like leaving you alone," he told Winnie as they discussed the arrangements. "But we need the money if we're going to expand the herd next spring." She noted his use of we, but didn't comment on it. "I'll be fine. The Rodriguezes are close by if I need anything." Still, he hesitated. "Maybe I should ask Hector to stay here while I'm gone." "Yancey," she said firmly, "I am perfectly capable of managing for a few days. I can shoot, remember? You taught me yourself." He finally relented, but spent the day before his departure making sure everything was in good repair and teaching her how to operate the rifle he was leaving behind. "Just in case," he insisted. The morning of his departure, Winnie rose early to prepare a hearty breakfast. They ate mostly in silence, both aware of the strange tension that had developed between them. As Yancey prepared to mount his horse, he suddenly turned to Winnie. "I got something for you. Been meaning to give it to you for a while." From his saddlebag, he produced a small package wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a beautiful hair comb made of polished tortoiseshell. "Saw it in the mercantile last time we were in town," he explained, looking somewhat embarrassed. "Thought it would suit you." Winnie ran her fingers over the smooth surface, deeply touched by the unexpected gift. "It's beautiful, thank you." "Well," he said gruffly, "should get going if I want to make good time." Impulsively, Winnie stood on tiptoe and kissed his cheek. "Be safe." For a moment, Yancey stood frozen, a look of surprise on his face. Then he nodded, mounted his horse and rode away, turning once to wave before disappearing over the hill. The first 2 days of Yancey's absence passed uneventfully. Winnie kept busy with household chores and tending to the chickens and vegetable garden. On the 3rd day, however, disaster struck. A sudden thunderstorm rolled in from the mountains, bringing with it lightning that struck a tree near the barn. The dry summer conditions meant the fire spread quickly. Winnie, who had been inside the cabin when the storm hit, smelled smoke and rushed outside to see flames already engulfing half the barn. Her first thought was for the horses. She ran to the burning structure and managed to lead the 3 animals to safety, including Yancey's prized stallion, Thunder. But as she turned back to assess the damage, she realized with horror that the wind was carrying embers toward the cabin. There was no time to fetch help. The nearest neighbor was Hector, at least 2 miles away, and the fire was spreading too quickly. Instead, Winnie grabbed buckets and began a desperate shuttle between the spring and the cabin, dousing the roof and walls whenever sparks landed. For hours she fought the flames alone, her arms aching, lungs burning from smoke, but determination driving her on. By the time the rain finally came hard enough to help douse the fire, she had managed to save the cabin, though the barn was a complete loss. Exhausted beyond measure, Winnie sank to her knees in the mud, rain soaking her clothes and hair. The horses huddled beneath an oak tree, nervous but safe. The chickens, thankfully, had been in their coop on the opposite side of the property and were unharmed. Hector arrived the following morning, having seen the smoke from his property. He found Winnie asleep in a chair on the porch, rifle across her lap, still keeping watch over the property despite her exhaustion. "Dios mío," he exclaimed when she explained what had happened. "You fought this alone." "You could have been killed. I couldn't let it take the cabin," she said simply. "Not after everything Yancey has done for me." Hector studied her for a long moment, then nodded as if confirming something to himself. "You love him." It wasn't a question, and Winnie didn't deny it. "What good does it do? I'm his housekeeper." "You are much more than that," Hector replied. "Anyone with eyes can see it. Even a blind man could feel it in the air when you two are together." With Hector's help, Winnie cleared away the worst of the debris and secured temporary shelter for the horses. He offered to stay until Yancey returned, but she assured him she would be fine. That night, sitting alone in the cabin that she had fought so hard to save, Winnie finally admitted to herself what she had been trying to deny for months. She was deeply, irrevocably in love with Yancey Young. The question now was what to do about it. Her position was precarious. If she confessed her feelings and he didn't return them, their comfortable arrangement would be ruined. He might even feel obligated to let her go, and the thought of leaving the ranch, of leaving him, made her chest ache with a physical pain. Yancey returned on the 6th day, riding hard into the yard, his face tight with worry. Hector had sent word about the fire, though the messenger hadn't known details beyond the barn being lost. He practically leapt from his horse when he saw Winnie standing on the porch. "Are you all right?" "Were you hurt?" "I'm fine," she assured him, touched by his concern. "Just tired. The horses are safe too." Yancey surveyed the charred remains of the barn, then turned back to Winnie. "The barn can be rebuilt if anything had happened to you." He didn't finish the thought, instead wrapping his arms around her in a tight embrace. Winnie stiffened in surprise, then melted against him, allowing herself this moment of comfort after days of strain. When Yancey finally released her, his expression was troubled. "Hector said you fought the fire alone. Why didn't you get help?" "There wasn't time," she explained. "The wind was carrying embers to the cabin roof. I couldn't leave." A look she couldn't interpret crossed his face, something between admiration and dismay. "You risked your life for this place." "It's my home too," she said simply. That evening, after Yancey had washed away the dust of travel and changed into clean clothes, they sat at the kitchen table while he recounted his trip to Sacramento. The cattle sale had been successful, bringing in more money than expected. "Enough to rebuild the barn and then some," he concluded. "We'll start as soon as I can get materials and help." "I'm so sorry about the barn," Winnie said, guilt evident in her voice. "If I'd checked the lightning rod more carefully—" "Don't," Yancey interrupted. "You saved the horses and the cabin. That's what matters." He hesitated, then reached across the table to take her hand. "When I got Hector's message about the fire, all I could think was that I might lose you." Winnie's heart skipped a beat at his words. "You were worried about me." "Of course I was worried." He stopped, withdrawing his hand and standing abruptly. "It's been a long day. We should both get some rest." Disappointed by the sudden retreat, Winnie nodded and began clearing the dishes. Whatever moment had been building between them had passed, leaving her more confused than ever. Over the next few weeks, they fell back into their routine, though something had shifted in their relationship. Yancey was both more attentive and more distant, bringing her small gifts from town, but avoiding situations where they might be alone together for too long. Work began on the new barn, with neighbors from miles around coming to help with the raising. It was custom in the country; everyone pitched in when disaster struck, knowing they might need the same help someday. Even some townspeople from Knights Ferry rode out to assist, including Harold Jenkins from the general store and Sheriff Miller. Winnie found herself busy feeding the workers, preparing massive meals with Maria's help. The women worked side by side in the kitchen, Maria taking the opportunity to continue her gentle probing about Winnie's feelings for Yancey. "He watches you all the time," Maria observed as they rolled out pie crusts. "When you laugh, his whole face changes." "He's just being kind," Winnie insisted, though hope flickered in her chest. Maria snorted. "Kind does not make a man look at a woman the way he looks at you. That is something else entirely." The barn raising culminated in a celebration, with fiddle music, dancing, and plenty of food and drink. As the evening progressed, Winnie found herself drawn into a dance by Harold Jenkins, then Sheriff Miller, and finally Hector, who twirled her with surprising grace for a man his age. When the music slowed, Yancey appeared at her side. May I have this dance, Miss Keating?" It was the first time they had danced together, and Winnie was acutely aware of his hand at her waist and the mere inches separating them. They moved together as if they'd been partners for years, his sure steps guiding her across the packed earth floor of the new barn. "Thank you for everything you've done," he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "Not just with the fire, but every day. You've made this place a real home." "I should be thanking you," she replied. "You gave me a chance when no one else would." He shook his head. "No, Winnie. You gave me something I didn't even know I was missing." Before she could ask what he meant, the music ended, and they were once again surrounded by neighbors offering congratulations on the new barn. The celebration continued late into the night. When the last guest had departed, Winnie and Yancey stood on the porch, watching the moon rise over the distant hills. "I should turn in," Winnie said reluctantly, not wanting the evening to end. "Wait," Yancey said, touching her arm lightly. "There's something I need to tell you." Her pulse quickened. "Yes," he took a deep breath. "I've been offered a position as a trail boss for a cattle drive to Wyoming. Good money, better than I can make here in a year." Of all the things she had imagined him saying, this wasn't even on the list. "Oh, when would you leave?" 2 weeks from now. I'd be gone at least 3 months. Winnie felt as if the ground had dropped away beneath her feet. 3 months without him. The ranch would feel empty, hollow. "If it's a good opportunity, you should take it," she managed to say, proud that her voice remained steady. "Would you be all right here alone? Hector could check in on you and I'd arrange for supplies." "I'll be fine," she assured him, though she felt anything but. "I've proven I can handle things, haven't I?" Yancey nodded, his expression unreadable in the moonlight. "Yes, you have." "I'll give them my answer tomorrow." That night, Winnie lay awake, tears silently tracking down her cheeks. She had known this contentment couldn't last forever, but the prospect of months alone on the ranch, wondering if Yancey would even return, was almost unbearable. The following day, Yancey rode into town to send his response to the cattle company. When he returned, he was carrying a large crate in the wagon alongside the usual supplies. "What's that?" Winnie asked as she helped unload the purchases. "Something I've been meaning to get for a while," he replied vaguely. "I'll show you after supper." Curiosity plagued her throughout the meal, but Yancey deflected her questions with a small smile. After they'd eaten and cleared away the dishes, he finally led her to the main room where the crate now sat. "Before I open this, I want to tell you something," he said, suddenly serious. "I turned down the trail boss position." Winnie's heart leapt. "You did, but why?" "It was good money, you said so yourself." "Some things are worth more than money." He gestured to the crate. "Go ahead, open it." Puzzled, Winnie knelt beside the wooden box and lifted the lid. Inside, carefully packed in straw, were dozens of plates, bowls, and cups, a complete set of china more elegant than anything she had ever used, even at Blackwell's. "Yancey, what?" She lifted one of the plates, admiring the delicate blue pattern. "It's a set from San Francisco," he explained. "Ordered it weeks ago, before the fire." He took the plate from her hands and deliberately dropped it on the floor, where it shattered into pieces. Winnie gasped. "What are you doing?" Instead of answering, Yancey took another plate and broke it too, then another and another, until a dozen lay in fragments at their feet. "Yancey, stop. These are beautiful dishes, why are you breaking them?" He knelt beside her, taking her hands in his. "Because they're just things, Winnie. Things can be replaced." His gaze was intense, unwavering. "The day I saw you being whipped over a plate, something in me broke. No one should ever value property over a person, especially not someone as remarkable as you." Winnie's eyes filled with tears. "I don't understand." "I'm trying to show you badly. I admit that I would break every dish I own, everything I possess, before I would ever let anyone hurt you again. Because you are precious, Winnie." Irreplaceable. He took a deep breath. Because I love you. The words hung in the air between them, fragile and momentous. Winnie felt as though her heart might burst from her chest. You love me, she whispered. More than I thought possible, he admitted. I've been fighting it for months, telling myself it wasn't right because you work for me, because you might feel obligated. But when I thought about leaving for 3 months, all I could think was that I couldn't bear to be away from you that long. Tears spilled freely down Winnie's cheeks now. I love you too, Yancey. I have for so long, but I was afraid to tell you. His face lit with such joy that it took her breath away. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Yancey leaned forward and kissed her. It was gentle at first, then deepening as she responded, her arms winding around his neck. When they finally parted, both breathless, Yancey pressed his forehead against hers. Marry me, Winnie. Not because I'm your employer or because you have nowhere else to go, but because you want to build a life with me, be my partner in everything. Yes, she answered without hesitation. Yes, with all my heart. They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the Knights Ferry Church, with Hector and Maria as witnesses. Sheriff Miller gave the bride away, and Mrs. Peterson wept joyfully in the front pew. Even Harold Jenkins closed his store to attend, bringing a hand-carved wooden clock as a wedding gift. Samuel Blackwell was conspicuously absent, having left town the week before on business, though rumor had it he'd departed to avoid the embarrassment of seeing his former servant marry a man who had publicly defied him. The newlyweds returned to the ranch that evening, now truly their home together. As Yancey carried Winnie across the threshold, she laughed with pure happiness. What about all those broken dishes? She asked teasingly. We'll need something to eat on. We saved plenty, he replied with a smile. But I meant what I said. I'd break every last one if it meant keeping you safe and happy. I know you would, she said softly. That's just one of the many reasons I love you. As the years passed, the young ranch prospered. Yancey's cattle operation expanded, and Winnie started a small side business selling preserves and baked goods in Knights Ferry, her recipes becoming famous throughout the county. They added 2 rooms to the cabin, making space for the children they both hoped would come. Their first child, a son they named James Hector Young, was born a year after their marriage. He had his father's green eyes and his mother's determination. 2 years later, they welcomed a daughter, Elizabeth Maria, whose laughter filled the ranch with joy. Samuel Blackwell eventually sold his estate and moved to San Francisco, his influence in Knights Ferry fading to a distant memory. The town itself grew and changed with the times, but the Youngs remained a respected fixture in the community, known for their generosity and fairness. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Yancey presented Winnie with a special gift, a china cabinet he had crafted himself from oak trees on their property. Inside, he had carefully arranged the remaining plates from the set he had partially destroyed the night he proposed. To remind us, he said, of what truly matters. Winnie touched the smooth wood, admiring his craftsmanship. It's beautiful, but I don't need reminders of what matters. I have you and our children for that. Later that evening, as they sat on the porch watching their children play in the yard, Winnie rested her head on Yancey's shoulder. Do you ever think about how we met? How different our lives might have been if you hadn't been passing through Knights Ferry that day? Yancey put his arm around her, drawing her close. I try not to dwell on might have beens, but I do thank God every day that I was there, that I found you. Or that I found you, she countered with a smile. The sun was setting over their land, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. In the distance, cattle grazed peacefully, and the new barn, larger and sturdier than the original, stood as a testament to community and perseverance. You know, Yancey said thoughtfully, for a man who once thought he'd never settle down, I can't imagine any life better than this one. Winnie squeezed his hand. Nor can I. Not a single day goes by that I don't feel grateful for this life we've built together. As twilight deepened into night, they remained on the porch, talking and laughing while their children chased fireflies in the yard. The ranch that had once been merely a place of work had become a true home filled with love, proof that sometimes the greatest treasures come from the most unexpected beginnings. And on a shelf in their bedroom, kept as a reminder of their journey, sat a single broken piece of china, worthless in monetary terms but priceless in what it represented. For it had taken a man willing to destroy what others valued to show a woman her true worth. And in doing so, they had both found something far more valuable than any possession. A love strong enough to heal old wounds and brave enough to face whatever the future might bring together.